This is Shabbos Vav. Previously, we were talking about in the Gemara exactly that 10 Tvachim high is now going to be a different Rosh. So we learned it out from the Aron. Even though the Torah only gives us the dimensions of the Aron that are 9 Tvachim, but we say the Kaparis, its cover, that was actually a Tefach, and the Gemara learns it out. And then we also had another way to learn, because some say that an Amma, because the Aron was an Amma and a half, is not actually 6 Tvachim to an Amma, which would make it 9 Tvachim tall. But actually, it's only 5 Tvachim to an Amma, which would make it 7.5 Tvachim tall, plus whatever the Kaparis was. Therefore, we have to know exactly how thick the cover was only again a tefach. So then, how to get 10 Tvachim? So the other option was going to be the wagons of that they used in the mission. The other option is going to be the wagons they used to transport the items in Mishkan. But then we learned that they loaded the wagons on the side. So maybe they weren't even 10 Tvachim tall, and maybe that wasn't even enough. Also, how do you even know they were 10 Tvachim tall? And even if they were 10 Tvachim tall, if you load them from the side, how exactly is that showing that it's different Rishus? So we learned further. Top of the Amid. It says, so ilu char b'rishus harabim g'vaya asar v'racham arba. So even if it was hollowed out rishus, so 10 tvachim high and 4 wide, shema eini asur l'shtamish b'taychel rabim. Maybe it's not going to be asur to use in rabim, or rabim will sarchai to put rabim into it, because maybe you're not putting the stuff into the 10 tvachim on top. Be putting it actually lower than 10 tvachim. It's going in from the sides. So even if you have it then it's 10 tvachim tall, but you're putting it lower, now you don't really have anything. Ella b'shashahayu moishkin krushim mizilazu. Only we learn it out from the agalas, from the wagons, at the times that they put in the krushim, which were the beams, and they put him across one or the other. Obviously, they had to uncover the wagon at that time, so therefore they were put on top. And if they were 10 tvachim tall, then they were put on top. And now we have that it was a different rishos, because they took it from the Rabin, which was the desert, and they put it into the wagons, which is Yachid, and the wagons are a different rishos because they're 10 tvachim tall, and therefore it makes it that now they're shayachid within Rosh Hashanah because 10 tvachim tall. So now we learn out that 10 tvachim tall is enough to make it a different rishos. So if you have inside Rosh Harabim, you have something that's 10 tvachim tall and 4 wide, that will be a shayachid, and putting it from Rosh Hashanah onto that, taking it off that, and putting it to Rosh Hashanah, that will be chayiv. We learned in the Mishnah, we go back now to the Mishnah, and the Mishnah we learned that if someone does part of it, the ani puts it into Baal Bais hands and he brings it in, or the Baal Bais puts it or brings it out and drops it into the ani's hands. So, and the ani takes it out of his hands. So if you don't do the full malacha, so then both of them are turin. So obviously pater al aser, they're not chayiv a chatos, but obviously you can't do it on Shabbos. Rabbi Yaakov Barak b'shem Chizkiah, Rabbi Yaakov Barak said the name of Chizkiah. Rabbanan b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbanan said b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. B'shem Shneim you're also malacha achas, because two people are doing the same malacha. We learned it similar before. We're doing half malachas, and we said that if a person wants to bring something out into Rabbim and not let's be chayiv on it, if he takes something that can be carried in one hand and he brings it with both hands, he does malacha with both hands. That could actually be considered like two people doing it, and obviously two people carrying something that one person can carry. That obviously also would make him putter. Again, this is all from chatos, this is from karis, but obviously there's drabbanons, and you can't just go willy-nilly carrying and moving things between Rishayos on Shabbos. Rav Shal Rebbe. So Rav asked Rebbe, so what happens if, let's say the guy is standing inside Shayachim, and I go ahead and put something on the guy's shoulder? He doesn't remember because he's like holding it, he's talking over the conversation, then he's like goodbye, and he goes and he leaves outside. So Tanya Amarle, when I was reviewing Masechta Shabbos and the Hilchos of Shabbos, I saw that chayiv, that he would be chayiv. It's not doiming to the first case. It's not doiming to the first case where someone is helping someone else do the malach. In other words, I hold out my hand, some places it into the hand, then takes it out of the rishos. Why is that? So the logic is like this: Sabar Rebbe Kevan Shakar Esraglov, since he's picking up his feet. So it's interesting. So it's saying here that picking up his feet, so that's like picking it up, and when he walked out, that's different. So it's different if I reach my hand from Rabim into Sayachid, and the person brings the thing into my hand, and then I bring it outside, and I take it outside to Rabim, so that I am Chayav, because, sorry, if I picked it up from the person's hand, again, so again, if I take it out of the person's hand and I bring it into the Sarabim, so that's for sure a malacha. So if I am reaching my hand in and a person places it into my hand, okay, so that's chayav. But if I reach my hand in and the person places it into my hand and then I take it out to Sarabim, I am not chayav, so I did not pick it up in Rosh Hashanah. However, this person who had it placed on the shoulder, it's different because he walked. So not only is he placed on the shoulder, is that what's turning it? Is the shoulder is that what's turning it? Or let's say I'm inside the house and someone hands me something, and then I walk out, then I should also be chayiv, even though he placed it into my hand. But again, the walking is what makes it like a lift. Like we learned before, remember from a few dafim ago, that walking in Risharabim is basically picking up, putting it down every single 2 steps. And then the question, of course, is going to be is how could anyone ever walk down this Risharabim? Because every step, every amma is going to be considered like a picking up and putting down. He'll never get to the arba amas. So here also is saying the walking is doing something. The walking is moving, is picking it up, and therefore in that case will be chayiv. Al daidai de Rebbe. So this is according to the opinion of Rebbe. So how I made Shirabim, a person was standing in the Shirabim, the Zarek, and he threw the kadeh, and then he advanced the kolata, and then he caught it with the Maho, what's this? So remember, Rabbi Yochanan had the same Shiloh, but the other way around. His was throwing it for Yachid, and I'm going into Zerabim. Now it's going for Zerabim, which is Yachid. So below Rebbe, who isn't that what Rebbe would inquire? The Rebbe Avid, Rebbe he holds that the Avir Mechitza is commercial. He considers that the airspace is like the domain itself. In Rosh Yachid, Rebbe considers that all the airspace is part of Rosh Yachid. So the second he threw it from Rosh Rabin and it entered the airspace of Rosh Rabin, and he entered the airspace of Rosh Yachid, so then obviously that's going to be considered the malacha. So what's the question? Like, so Tzarkal the law, really, we're really asking the other way around. That he's standing actually in Rosh Yachid. The Zarak, and he threw it for Kedim in advance of the Kalato of Sarabim, and then he caught it in Sarabim Ahu, what's it then? So now you don't have it. So now you throw it out of the Rosh Yachid, and maybe you don't have a point to Rebbe that all the ear space of Sarabim is considered Sarabim. So it's only when it's going to hit the ground that's going to be chayiv. But here you intercepted it. So what is the din? So Eshgach Tanim. So it's found in the Brisa. So Rebbe Paiter Ad Sheknuach. Rebbe rules that it is putter until it is actually placed down, until it actually hits the ground. If a person would knock the trajectory away, even if he's doing it himself, then it's not the full malacha. He didn't end up doing the malachas machshavas. He didn't do exactly what he intended. He intended to hit to a certain place in Sarabim, and said he knocked the trajectory away, so it's not considered like he picked it up and put it down. Amr Avun. Arun says, Rabbi Ben Azai, Rabbi Akiva, both Rabbi Azai and Rabbi Akiva all say something regarding the Avir of a Rishus. So Davar Echa, they all say something all similar. Rabbi Avad Avir Mechitza is Kamashma, that Rabbi considers the airspace of within walls, within Mechitzais, within walls, is considered that it is part of the Shayachid. Ben Azai Avid Avir Karmelis Kamashma, Kimasha. Ben Azai considers the airspace of Carmelis like it, and Rabbi Akiva of it Avir Rabim Kimasha, and Rabbi Akiva considers that the public domain airspace is like the airspace itself. So the person threw for Shtayachid. The second it got into Sarabim, that it hit the airspace, and that is itself. But again, not obviously not Shtayachid, but in the Carmelis, and definitely in Sarabim, we still have that if there was something that's standing there in the Sarabim that's 10 tefachim high and 4, that will be a Shtayachid. So the Avir of the Sarabim is only in the Sarabim part itself, not above, obviously, something that is his own domain. And again, now it turns on putting it down. So we spoke about last daf, and we spoke about why we're learning out of the Aron, and the question we had was, for the Gemara had was that the Aron was actually inside of Sayachim. The Aron was inside the Kodesh Kodashim. So therefore, how could you learn that a new Rosh Hashanah is inside another Rosh Hashanah? It's not possible. So we learned that basically we learned from the Aron when the Aron was standing and then the curtains were put around it. Every time it was disassembled and reassembled, the Aron would go first and then they would put the curtains around it. So that's where it was standing in Yerushalmi, where the Aron is standing plain by itself, not Shiyachim, standing in Yerushalmi in the desert, and that's where we learn out the 10th Vakim, that's where we learn out another Rishus. But of course, I said, but learning from there is tricky, because we're trying to not learn that it's a different Rishus, we're trying to learn that everything above that is considered Shemayim. So basically what we're saying is, are you learning it for below or learning it for above? So is 10 Tfachim and below, is that considered on the ground? Because now we're talking about a situation where if you have something that's in Yerushalim and it's 10 Tfachim high, and you say that Avir is like Yerushalim itself, when does it actually touch the ground? Because if it's 30 feet in the air, are you saying that, according to Rabbi Kiva, that that's considered touching the ground? That's already considered placing it? No, we have to go below 10 Tfachim, because everything above 10 Tfachim we learn is a different domain. So the Rabbi Kiva must hold then that it doesn't make a difference whether or not the walls around the base of the Mishkan were around the Aron, because we're just trying to learn that above that's a different above that's different Rishus. So therefore, we're not making that's when the Shaila turns. And if we're learning out from the Aron, that the Aron is going to be Shayachid itself, so then if it entered the airspace above the Aron, so that airspace will be Shayachid. If it entered the airspace of Shirabim, that'll be Shirabim. So again, according to Rabbi Kiva, you throw it into Shirabim. Does it consider hitting the ground? If we learn from the Aron, and we say the Aron, we can't learn it from the Aron that was in Rosh Hashanah, because the Aron itself is making itself as another Sayachid. So then, according to Rabbi Kiva, the only thing we learn out of that, according to Rabbi Kiva, the only thing we learn out of that Aron is that above that airspace is a different domain. So which means even 30 feet tall, according to Rabbi Kiva, that's going to be fine, because it's not a different domain, because there's nothing that's 10 tefachim below it. So Harabim that doesn't have a in it, that will go to the sky. However, you say you don't have to have it in the Aron in the middle of the desert. You could have learned it from the Aron that was in the Mishkan, and just learning out that the 10 Tvachim is different. Now, according to Rabbi Kiva, when you throw it at Shirabim, even if it's above a regular Sarabim, so it's going to be, you throw it above the desert and or a main highway, and there's no shayachim there, and it hits, you're not going to be chayiv until it descends below 10 tefachim. That's where the whole thing turns. It depends on how you're learning it. So if you want to have this svar like I have, that it makes no difference whether or not do we learn out of the Aron that was sitting inside the four walls of the Mishkan, because the only thing we learn out is whether or not it's considered grounded or not. So then fine. Then according to Rabbi Kiva, it would have to go below 10 tefachim to hit the ground. But if you're saying no, the only way to make it, to learn how to Aron is making it another Rishus. And making it another Rishus is above 10 tefachim, and above 10 tefachim is a different situation. So now with Rabbi Kiva, you throw it in Shizarabim, it's even 30 feet high, already you're going to be chayiv. Okay, it all depends on how you learn from the Aron and what you're trying to learn. It's a different Rishus, or whether it's making it Yachid and Shizarabim. Our brochure is a Shabbos portion. The Shabbos, Yachid, a private domain, Sarabim, public domain, Carmelist. We're gonna see what a Carmelist means, and Uvoy, She'ina, and Ufoloshim. And then streets that are not open on both ends. Veitos Yachid, which is the private domain. Charitz, Shahu, Amai, Kasara, V'rachel, Arbam. A ditch that is 10 deep and 4 wide. Together, Shu Gavoya Sarah Baracha Arba, and a fence that is 10 high and wide. Zorushayas Hayakid Gibor. These are for sure private domains, and obviously, of course, anything enclosed in walls. Ve'ezu he Rishos Harabim Gemura, and what is considered a complete Rishos Harabim, a public domain, is highways that go through a city, or highways that go from city to city, Upaltia, or plazas, that people gather, and people sell things, and people traverse, Umidbar, a desert, Uvaya Yahapuloshim, and streets that are open on both ends, streets that connect to both ends and keep going. So then those are all considered Shos Harabim. A might see Rosh Hashanah Rabim. You want me to take out from Rosh Hashanah Rabim. The law Machnisim Rosh Harabim Rosh Hashanah. You can't bring in from Rabim from public domain to a private domain. If you take out or you bring in, but inadvertently it's going to be a chatos. Mazid, if it's on purpose, chayiv kares, you chayiv to be kares, which means the soul gets cut off. The nisko, when the person gets stoned, whether he takes it out or whether he brings it in, whether he does it with his hand or whether he throws it, so that either way is going to be chayiv. Now, a yam, a sea, in other words, an ocean, a large lake, an ocean, ubika, or an open fields, the istva, and a bench area outside a store, the skupa or a threshold, the Carmelis, and we will see what a Carmelis is. They're not the Rosh Hashanah. They're considered Carmelis. They're neither. But we'll see what a Carmelis is as in the category of Carmelis. The inner nice in the nice in Bahem, you cannot bring it there, you cannot pick it up. But if you do it, you are exempt. You're patel v'aser. In other words, you don't get a chatas, and you don't get a and you don't get a chorus, and you don't get stoned, but it's still not something that can be done on Shabbos. Our Rosh says, Afanan Kulan. We too have learned the Mishnah in all these examples that they're all considered a kamala. So a yam, that non-taman, as we learned in the Mishnah, Hazayre biyam arba amis pater. If a person throws arba amis into the sea, he is pater. Loisek davar arba amis, not only biyam, it's not only the 4 amis. That's in the sea. Ella filuzari b'chol yam potter. You throw any part of the yam, it's potter. Shekol yam nikro karmelis. Entire yam is considered a karmelis. Of course, the question is going to be, if you're saying that the water ebbs and flows, is that considered the yam or not? At that point, then again, why wouldn't the area right on the edge of it also be not considered? That would be a rabbin, perhaps. That could be a plaza, and then the yam would be a karmelis. Bika in area field. So it's not, we learned. So Habik, an area field, be Maisachama in the summer season, Sayachim, the Shabbos, consider Sayachim Shabbos, or Sarabim Tuma, and Sarabim for Tuma. We might say Shamim, but during the rainy season, Sayachim, Lakan, Sayachim for all of them. So if you're saying that it's Sayachim for both Tuma and for Shabbos, Loitehe to Una, Hakvas, Kalei, Behema. So why do they have to make a Ariv out of the different utensils and vehicles that we use with the behema? We learned the kipua clay behema metalklin. You take the vessels of the behema, which is the animal trapping, which is the saddles, the saddlebags, the harnesses. You gather it around, you surround it, and then you could carry within it. So if you're saying that it was considered shliachid, so why would you do that? So really, it's not shliachid. Really, it's a karmelis. So again, we see that in the area field is a karmelis. So it's saying shliachid only in the fact that it's not a shrabim, but it's definitely not a shliachid gemura. So therefore, it's a karmelis. So Istava also mentioned the non-food learned. And similar for bridges that are open on both ends and roads go underneath it. Obviously, if you traverse water underneath it, that already is a karmelis. So, but if let's say it's a road that goes underneath the bridge, so you can carry that under Shabbos and Rebuda. Or say you cannot carry under Shabbos. Of course, it all depends on what the roads are. Those roads that are traveled a lot underneath the bridge on Shabbos, then that could be considered Arish Zarabim. at least here we found that the bench part is considered a Carmelist according to a different brisa. So it's kupa, so a threshold. Threshold meaning the part that's in between the shtayach and the sarabim, like the doorway or the windowsill, that type of situation. So Daninam. So we learned in the Mishnah. If you take food and you place it on top of the threshold, Bain whether he returns and removes it, or Bain Chaitz and Acher, or someone else comes and removes it, Potter, Shalaya so Malach and Duvasakas, because no Malach was done in and of itself. So im ha'im also malachtoi valzakas chayim. If you did it in one, then it'll be chayim. What's interesting though is that if you're saying there's a threshold, so now we're talking about a carmelist. A threshold is now considered a carmelist because if I put it there in the threshold and the threshold I'm taking it out, if it's not considered a full malacha, obviously it was not for sheyachin to sharabin. So the threshold cannot be considered sheyachin. It's not considered sharabin because otherwise taking sheyachin, putting on the threshold would be considered for sheyachin to sharabin one way. And if you say it the other way, no, really the threshold is considered a Rishus HaYachid, then taking the threshold, which is Rishus HaYachid, and bringing it to Rabbim, should also make Chayev. Since it's neither, it must be a Carmelist. But if it's a Carmelist, we already learned that traversing through a Carmelist is not considered Chayev. And here we have Ben Azar says, Afilu Ibasam Lakta Bazakas, even if you did the Malachah one time, even if you went straight through the Carmelist, Potter, because he holds going through a Carmelist is Potter, because you can't go through a Carmelist will break up the going for Siachi and Tush Rapid. Of course, it's interesting to say this because I think it's interesting to Ben Azai because the Carmelist is very, very small. In other words, you could step over the Carmelist. So by the time you did one step in Shiyach and one step in Rabin, then we go, you had to pick up and put it down. Whereas the Carmelist was a little bit bigger, and you were forced to step into the Carmelist, and then I think most then would hold that it's Pater also. So here it must be a situation where you were able to completely walk over the Carmelist, but since you carried it over the Carmelist, when as I says, it's going to be Pater. So Carmelist, how do we get the name Carmelist? So Tani Rabbi he learns Carmel. It's very, very similar to caramel, the word Carmel. Now, Carmel literally means ripe grain, and that's why Hara Carmel in Eretz Yisrael and the whole Carmel area is because they had lots and lots of grain over there. So you can also read it Rachmal, which means soft and crushed. So ain't it loy lach v'lo yavish? It's neither moist nor dry. Elabainonai, it's in between. So v'hacha here too. Ain't it loy shterabim, loy shayachim. It's not a shterabim, loy shayachim. Ela carmelis. Ela, it's a carmelis. It's like it's basically soft crush. It's neither this or that. So I guess maybe caramelist comes from the word caramel also because it's ripe grain, but it's not new. It's not unripe grain that's not fit to be eaten. Then it's not fit to be eaten because it's fit to be eaten except for that it's still on the vine or on the stalk. So until taking off the stalk and processed, you can't really eat it. So it's food, but not food yet. And so I guess in both ways, learning it, caramelist means not this and not that. Interesting. Whoever the linguist was over there, good effort. Ezahi Carmelist. So what actually is a Carmelist, halachically, practically speaking? Rabbi Yaakov B'Shem Yechon, Rabbi Yaakov said Yechonon, Yegain, Chanuse, the Rav Yustine. It's like Rav Yustine's store. People would come into it, people go out of it, but it wasn't Sayachid because there was not people going in. It was Rabin because not enough people went in, so therefore it's a Carmelist. The Chatzos Rabin, a communal courtyard, Muvaya is Sheinam Mufulashim, and you have streets that are not open on both ends. If they make an Eruv, if they combine together, the different homeowners combine together to make Eruv Chaseris, then they can carry there. But if they can't do that, it's prohibited over there. So Rab Zei, Rabbi Shem, Rabbi Yehuda. Rab Zei said Rabbi Yehuda. Rab Zei, Rabbi Shem, or Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Shem, Rabbi Chanina, or it was Rab Zei and the Shem Rabbi Chanina, name Rabbi Chanina. Either way, that Smitzais Shabain Amulite, the walkways between pillars, Nidainin Carmelis are considered Carmelis. If you have a market and it's lined with pillars. So in between there is a carmelis because people can't run through. The pillars block people from running through and gathering in great amounts over there. People go through, so it's not yachid, but it's not Shirab either. Rabbi Shmuel bar Chia bar Yehuda b'Shem Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Shmuel bar Chia b'Shem Rabbi Yehuda says that the Pirkei Hamudam, that the pillars of flowers, Nido's carmelis, are regarded as carmelis. In other words, you have the capitals that are on the top of these big pillars, and they also have them on the bottom, designed obviously in different ways. That is considered a carmelis. L'chein tzricha, necessary because when it was going 3 tvachim high. Chia Berei Rav says, call Amaakev Darsav Shtrabim, anything that prevents people from moving Shtrabim, Nilaydin Carmel is considered a Carmelist. Rabbanam, the Karsinam, Amiram, the Rabbanam from Kisar Yasei, Apilu Kaitzin, Apilu Zuchuchin, either thorns and also glass protruding, Lechain, Shricha, Rashani Gavayin Fleisha, since it doesn't go above 3, and there's any people from going there, Carmelists, they are all a Carmelist.